Alrighty, today we're gonna make a monochromatic little mini artwork on our little teeny tiny canvas. And the skill building that we're looking at today is learning how to mix our paints without contaminating the paint, and learning just how little you need to go a long way with acrylics. So, and also we're learning how to create a variety of different tones using just one color. So my one color here in this painting is this phthalo green and white and a little bit of black that we'll be using to create these tones. But to get started, first, what we need to do is we need to prep our canvas. And so I've just got this little mini canvas. Put your name on the back, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start mixing our paints. So this is just a plate that I'm using as a palette. That is what I would suggest to you guys. Keep your plates, don't get rid of them. The palettes are, you can use this palette. Cool thing about acrylics is when it dries, it kind of just stays in place and it doesn't remix into your other stuff. If this drives you crazy, you can peel it all away, okay? So a palette knife, this is the palette knife that I'm using, is really handy with this, because what you can do is you can go into your little tub of paint, and instead of, notice I'm not taking a whole lot, this is a little bit, and I'm gonna put this just right on top of my old paint here, okay? And I'm putting it onto my palette. Now I'm gonna clean off my palette knife, and then I'm gonna go into my color, and I'm gonna place that onto my palette as well, okay? And that was a lot. That was probably a lot more than I need. That's probably enough for my whole painting, okay? So now I'm scraping that off. And what I really can't stress enough is a little bit goes a long way. Students have a tendency to take paint and they take these huge blobs and then they don't use them. And it goes down the drain, which paint should never go down the drain. It clogs the drain. And it's just super wasteful. So what I want to show you today is how to make a light tone, a light value of this green color for the background. If you look at this painting, it becomes the lines of the painting, okay? So I'm going to now move to my paintbrush, and I'm gonna scoop some white, and I'm gonna pull my white over here, and then I'm gonna just take a touch of green, just a teeny tiny bit of green, and I'm going to blend, okay? So very quickly, you can see that color overtakes that white really quickly, okay? And it's already starting to load my brush, and it's blending nicely. I'm grabbing just a little bit more white to ensure that I have enough paint to cover my canvas. I'm thinking I kind of don't, so I'm gonna get a little bit more white. And that's probably enough. So what I'm going to do now, I'm gonna come over and I'm gonna fill my canvas with this nice light green color that I've got. Now, working on top of a piece of paper is an excellent idea so that you're not getting paint all over the table as I am right now, okay? So remember, painting is messy. It stains your clothes. You want to make sure that you are working in a manner that is not gonna make a giant mess, okay? Also, you wanna make sure that you're working with clothing that you don't mind getting paint on, because it does stain. So I've got the basic majority of my canvas done. Remember, these edges do make a difference. So I'm gonna add a little bit of paint to my edges. Edges of your painting are seen, so you want to make sure that there's paint on them. Now, set this aside, let this dry, and meanwhile, I'm gonna clean my paintbrush. Never, never, never leave acrylic paint in your paintbrushes. That's gonna ruin the brush, okay? So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna put it in water, and I'm gonna clean it out. Then I'm gonna let this dry. While this is drying, I'm going to start designing on a separate piece of paper what I want this to look like. So for that, I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm going to just sketch out how I want to use my line design, okay? So we'll say that's mine. And what I'm thinking is I don't want to break up my piece just directly down the center, okay? When you go and you break things out just very simply, it's not very exciting for the viewer to look at. So I'm definitely not going to do that, okay? And I am going to just break this up. You can come up with your own design. You do you. Make sure that you're creating a design that you like, okay? And break it up however you would like. With this one, I really wanted triangles and lines, triangles, lines, triangle, line, triangle, line. Okay, so I did have a focus there. This one, I did more of a radiating sort of a sun kind of design. And notice how I altered my gradients. So we're going to be doing that here soon. Okay, and then this one was just a straight line design where I had just different lines running into each other. So if you really think about what's going on with your lines, you could get some really interesting ways of using line. So it's up to you with how you use your line. It really is. Okay. So I'm letting this dry. I'm working on my design. All right, so my canvas is dry. I've got my paints ready to go. My brush is clean. I went and cleaned that. And I've also got my design. So next on my canvas, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use this skinny little tape and I'm going to tape off my design. Any tape that you have is going to be fine, and you use what you have at home, okay? If you're trying to finish this up at home. If you're finishing it up in the classroom, I've got this skinny tape, so definitely utilize what we have in the classroom if you're working on this in the classroom. Okay, so based on my design, I'm just gonna take my tape and I'm gonna start putting it onto my canvas. With this, go over your edges. Okay, so I'm going around the edge, and you want to push the tape down as you go. If the tape is not sealed properly, you're going to run into some problems for sure, okay? Because the paint's gonna leak under that tape. So you want to make sure the tape is definitely pushed down onto your canvas. All right. So I've taped off all my sections. One thing that I really can't stress enough is make sure these little edges are not hanging off rough like. You want to push down your tape, make sure everything's all pushed down, and make sure you're happy with your design. It really does help to go back through and make sure everything's got an enclosure where you can just fill in the spaces, okay? Taping does take quite some time, but in the end, that's what's gonna really make a difference. Alrighty, so let's start painting. With my painting again, I'm going back to my palette where I've already got my white and my green already sitting on my palette. I am gonna pull a little bit of black onto my palette now, and these are the three paints that we're going to use. So we've got black as our dark value, okay? And it really takes just a teeny tiny bit of the black to make your tones, okay? Your different values, my green and then my white. I am now with my clean palette, I'm gonna bring in a little bit more white onto my palette, okay? My palette knife was clean, but it's still got a little bit of black on there. All right, so I'm gonna put my caps on my paints. No, I'm not, I'm gonna paint, okay. So now I'm going to fill the sections with different values. And my goal is to have 10 different values. And I've got 13 different sections. So that means I could have 13 different values. Black and white are a value that you can just straight lay down, okay? So here I go, I'm going to paint. Okay, so Now that I'm done painting, putting all my different values on there and painting, a couple pro tips I want to make sure that you understand. First off, make sure your paints are going over the edge, Also, when you're mixing, think about working. If you notice, I went lighter to darker, okay? Then I cleaned my brush and then I went back into some lighter values, okay? So think about doing that. And if your paint is really thin, my white was really thin, so I went back over it, okay? So now I'm gonna let this dry. Here's, definitely make sure it's dry before you peel the tape. If you don't let it dry, you're going to have, when you peel the tape, it's gonna smear everywhere, okay? So make sure it's dry. Okay, so I've peeled off my tape, and I have a couple spots that that I'm noticing where I had a little bit of tape. The tape went kind of over, and it made a funky line, and some of my lines aren't totally clean. So I'm going to use this teeny tiny brush, and I'm going to go back into my painting, and I'm going to try and match that color as best I can. And it was like a light turquoisey color. And I'm just going to clean up my lines just a little bit on those two spots, okay? And I may also decide that if I want to come back in and try and clean up these lines, from a distance, it doesn't look awful. Up close, it doesn't look great. So, so that's one way to fix that. Also, I feel like my little white spot here is kind of, it's getting lost a little bit. So one thing that I might consider doing is coming in with a Sharpie, and this gets a little tricky, and you don't have to do this, but to give this just a little more of a powerful pop with that white, because this was my lines were so light, I may outline it. This is also another option with some of these lines. You may want to come back in with a Sharpie and go back over. This is optional. And it's kind of a final touch on these little paintings if you would like to do something like that. But see, that makes that line look a lot cleaner. Now, you need to have a steady hand with this because the canvas is bumpy. And if you don't have a steady hand, it might kind of be frustrating for you. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do with my piece, just to finish it up. Otherwise, I am happy with the outcome, and I don't feel like I have to do these black lines, but sometimes we just like to keep working with our artwork, and that's what I'm doing here. Okay, so this is the completed piece. This will be going into your acrylic portfolio. Okay, so hold on to it, don't lose it. And now that I've started with these black lines, I'm just gonna say, I think I'm gonna have to outline everything now. So I did get myself into a little bit more work, but it is going to definitely have a different feel once I'm done, and I might actually like how these lines work out better.